Each year, more of us are choosing cheap flights to travel on our holiday trips than ever before. But is aviation fuel responsible for creating the very weather we are trying to escape from? During this program, we will explore how the aviation industry has gone from pioneer to polluter in their quest to reach for the sky.
The Lysander was the plane that used to tow the drogue for target practice. They'd go out over the sea and you'd continually hear pop, 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 like this. And on one or two occasions, the drogue was so badly shot up, it would drop in the fields here.
Ted Solomon has lived here on the Gower Peninsula of South Wales his entire life. His passion for aircraft is equally matched by an intense love for his farm. Strewn across his farm lie the crumbling remains of a World War II airbase. To prepare for the Battle of Britain in 1940, the Air Ministry took control of his fields to train fighter pilots.
We had the Airman's Mess, the Sergeant's Mess, from which I'm speaking now, and the Officers' Mess, all put on our fields.
For many generations, his own and many other families had relied on their common rights to feed their animals on nearby Fairwood Common. But over the course of the war, much of the rich and fertile soil disappeared under concrete runways, access roads and buildings.
We were looking forward to that huge central area of Fairwood to be given back. And all the installations demolished, taken away.
Despite written assurances that Ted's farm would be returned intact, the Air Ministry instead abandoned the airbase, leaving the buildings and runways to slowly decline. 11 years after the end of the war, the Gower Peninsula was officially recognised as Britain's first area of outstanding natural beauty. In that same year, Parliament extinguished the grazing rights of all Fairwood commoners. As compensation, Ted was offered only £51, 5 shillings and 11 pence. In return, Ted would have to agree to waive away any possibility of future claims. The young farmer refused to sign.
So that's how it stands today. They've taken the land and they've refused to pay us the price for it. The commoners being farmers, busy people, nobody has the time really to put into it to bring it to a head.
Meanwhile, back on Fairwood Common, this World War II airfield was put back into use, mainly for private flying lessons. Until 2002, when a high-flying accountant stepped into the picture. Millionaire Roy Thomas purchased the lease of Fairwood Airfield for an undisclosed sum, adding it to his extensive list of properties in the nearby city of Swansea.
Hotel, route via the Mumbles to join downwind right-hand runway 10.
Mr. Thomas is also chairman of his own airline company, Air Wales, which began using the airfield for commuting between London and Swansea. Mr. Thomas hopes to expand the small airfield situated in the middle of a prime beauty spot into a fully commercial airport. By lowering journey times, Air Wales is challenging the other existing methods of transport in the race to London. However, as road traffic around the airport increases, local residents are concerned about the impact a larger airport will have on their lives.
The people that come to Gower are mainly couples and families with young children, and they come for the beaches, they come from the walks, and my guest book is full of remarks about how relaxing Gower is, how glorious the beaches are. People say, well, there won't be big aeroplanes coming in. There doesn't have to be big aeroplanes. The 50-seaters that are coming in now are very, very noisy propeller planes.
Aircraft noise is only one concern. In the summer of 2003, Swansea City councillors were summoned to the airfield to inspect the proposed site of a new aircraft hangar. Similar in size to 144-bedroom houses, nature lovers are concerned that the huge construction work could affect the surrounding award-winning countryside.
We've been concerned about the airport for many years because it's completely surrounded by a SAC, that's a special area of conservation. It contains the marsh fritillary butterfly, which is quite a rare species in Europe generally. They have considered it as an area of outstanding natural beauty, but that's not an ecological designation, that's a landscape designation, and they haven't looked at the ecology at all.
At the Guildhall, the councillors find public demonstrations as they arrive to make their decision about the construction of the enormous hangar.
Any other development of this size would go through rigorous control. There would be environmental studies done, there would be impact on the local economy and the local environment, but this is not happening in this case, and we feel it's a case where the council are actually in favour of something because a local businessman is supporting it.
And 3 days before the planning committee, when the papers became available, we had a meeting with one of the chief planners. I asked about the ecology of the site, and he said that an ecological report had been prepared by one of the ecological people in his department, Judy Shorrock. So we asked the receptionist to contact Judy Shorrock to find out where the report was, and the message came back that the report had been lost.
Swansea Council later admitted that the report had only ever consisted of a hastily written email from their ecologist. The unsigned note was inserted into the file before being presented to the planning committee. Inside the council chambers, only one councillor spoke out against the airport, and the plans for the hangar were passed. Controversial plans to erect barbed wire fences surrounding the common were also given the green light. Friends of the Earth continue to request a full report on how the airport expansion would affect the surrounding ecology.
Eventually we had a reply, and this must have been 3 months after the planning meeting. And the report said there was no ecological report.
So you feel like you've been lied to?
Oh, well, we've been deceived, we feel. We've been deceived.
David Gill, head of Swansea Planning for Major Projects, declined to be interviewed and supplied this statement instead. It is adopted council planning policy to support the retention and development of the airport, subject to there being no unacceptable adverse environmental impact.
Isn't there a fundamental problem with the airport being that it's in the wrong place?
Clearly, if you were establishing an airport to service southwest Wales now, you wouldn't build it at Fairwood on Gower. It would be closer to the M4. Having said that, there clearly is that infrastructure there. It would cost an awful lot now to close it down because compensation would have to be paid by presumably the local authority if it chose to go down that road, and it does not because it strongly supports the role of Swansea Airport as a regional airport.
Political support for the industry is so strong that in 2003 the government launched their 30-year aviation plan, also known as a white paper. The document supports the expansion of nearly every main British airport. However, to gain permission to expand at Heathrow, the airline industry has to first lower the levels of toxic air already hanging over its neighbours. If the pollution can somehow be lowered, 700 homes surrounding Britain's busiest airport will be demolished to make way for a third runway. The expansion plans also call for the closure and demolition of 3 schools and will forcibly evict thousands of people.
From every point of view, the government's white paper is a poor document. It has relied almost entirely for its claims about economics on work done by the aviation industry. It hasn't seriously tackled global warming. It has dismissed noise. It hasn't really considered air pollution. And my prediction would be that long before the 30 years is out, the aviation white paper will be seen as a redundant document.
John Stuart's organisation has been set up to inform and represent the views of communities opposing the expansion plans at Heathrow. Whilst Clear Skies concentrate on legal challenges, other groups are turning to a more direct form of action. After completing the 30-metre climb, 5 activists began a week-long occupation of a Heathrow crane to highlight how airline corporations are being heavily subsidised by the government. Each year, aviation companies avoid paying £9 billion in taxes. The directors are not required to pay VAT when purchasing their aircraft, while most of the vast quantities of fuel they consume remains entirely free of tax.
If that was imposed, and if aviation fuel was taxed at the same rate as petrol for cars, the demand would be damped down to such an extent there would be no need for any more runways, even in the southeast, over the next 30 years. The government is artificially stimulating demand through these tax concessions.
To curb the predicted growth in air traffic, many have pointed towards rail, and particularly high-speed trains, as a more sustainable solution for our travel needs.
45% of the journeys people make in the Eurocontrol countries, that's the wider Europe, are 500 kilometres or less in length. That's about 3 hours on a train. There's enormous scope to switch from short-haul flights to high-speed rail. The sadness is that the government hasn't really investigated alternatives to this growth seriously in any way at all.
Concerns have been raised about the role of Swansea Council in funding a commercial airport situated in the middle of a designated area of outstanding natural beauty, particularly since the region is already well served by Cardiff International Airport, just 40 minutes away. As construction begins at the Fairwood Common Airfield, not everyone is pleased by Swansea Council's support for pouring over £800,000 of public funds into the private company.
As somebody that's needed to use our own capital and our own assets to start up a business, I resent public money being used for what is basically a commercial enterprise and a profit-making enterprise.
As air traffic at Swansea Airport grows, the danger of accidents may also increase. Here, a helicopter trying to land has crashed just in front of the control tower.
Do you know if anybody's hurt?
We don't know at this time, that's why we're saying no film and we don't know what's happened.
Fortunately, no one was injured in this collision, and emergency services were on the scene within minutes.
No, the A7 is blocked by an incident. It's completely blocked.
Well, we were just standing, we heard the clatter, and when I looked over the building, all I could see was the rotor blades and debris flying up.
As the fire service left, ground staff found that a number of other aircraft had also suffered considerable damage by flying debris. While reporters are picking up the story and airport staff are picking up the pieces, one of the most serious impacts of uncontrolled aviation is generally being overlooked.
The
The hottest day in history. 101 degrees Fahrenheit. It's the hottest day ever recorded in Britain.
It's never been hotter in Britain. Temperatures for the last week are already around 10 degrees above average.
So it's clear that global warming is reality.
The hottest years on record have all occurred since 1990, and the rise in temperature of our seas is creating extreme weather patterns worldwide. While it is accepted that this heating up may be a natural process, scientists are convinced that the addition of our own pollution is a cause for concern.
What's happening now is that it's being accelerated by the increased greenhouse effect as a result of pollution of the atmosphere, particularly the input of carbon dioxide. And we're now seeing levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere which are higher than at any other time in the last 2 million years.
Professor Hambrey joins the majority of world scientists in agreement that increased carbon dioxide will raise the Earth's temperature by a minimum of 1.4 degrees over the coming decades. And while 1.4 degrees may seem like very little to be concerned about, we have to go back 15 million years to find a comparably warm climate.
And 15 million years ago, there were no Northern Hemisphere ice sheets, there was no Greenland ice sheet, there were no mountain glaciers or anything like that. That water was in the sea, resulting in higher sea levels at that time.
As debate continues about just how fast the polar ice sheets are melting today, Professor Hambrey raises concerns about the glaciers and ice caps close to home.
The smaller glaciers, particularly the mountain glaciers and ice caps in places like the Alps or Norway, North America, these are now rapidly disappearing. But if these melt, we're talking about sea level rises predicted to be of the order of 1/4 to 1/2 metre by the year 2100.
The increased volume of water in our seas is already damaging our coastlines, with knock-on effects being felt further inland. In 2004, the Treasury Department calculated the national cost of global warming caused by air travel alone is £1.4 billion every year. Yet the airline industry only contributes half of that amount back to the Treasury each year. In a bid to avoid paying the costs, a number of corporations have decided to deny the very existence of global warming.
Global warming is definitely with us now. I mean, there's some very striking changes which you can see just in terms of the weather. Somewhere like here in Britain, for example, there's been a big increase in the amount of flooding that we've been seeing in the winter months. Actually, it's been doubling since over the last 30 years. And in other parts of the world, it's been getting drier as a direct result.
During the research for his book, Mark Linus travelled across 5 continents investigating the impact of global warming. Trekking in the Peruvian Andes, he returned to a glacier which his own father had photographed back in 1980.
And this glacier, which I went back to see what it looked like, had completely disappeared. I was expecting some kind of change, but it had disappeared, and the same kinds of impacts are being seen now on mountain ranges right across the world. It's a global phenomenon. This is a global change in temperatures, and it's affecting all of the Earth quite dramatically.
Back in Wales, sea defences are now proving to be so inadequate that millions of pounds of public money is being spent on the construction of ever higher barriers. Cheaper airfares are encouraging more of us to fly each year, and the resulting carbon dioxide pollution is growing at an alarming rate. Some fear that conflict of interest may stop the government from supporting less polluting forms of transport.
The government is very close to the aviation industry. It sees the aviation industry as a key component of globalization, which it believes in. And also, it is very aware that if it did try to stop cheap flights, it might be branded as stopping people having their holidays in the sun.
But people are seeking out alternative ways of exploring our planet. When a young couple emigrated from Britain to Australia, they chose the most environmentally friendly mode of transport in the world to get them there.
Incredible!
After thousands of miles in the saddle, the effects of burning fossil fuels was all too clear by the time they reached India.
Kev and I have had earache, constant sore nose, swollen glands, and we don't have a cold, we don't have any illness. It's just that's how polluted it is here in Delhi. It's quite scary that people have to live here.
Arriving in Iran, they felt sure of their decision to try a different method of transport other than the aeroplane.
Well, I'm standing in the middle of Esfahan's famous Ayande River. Or at least I'm standing where the river used to be. There hasn't been any rain in some parts of Iran for over 2 years. And the views from the tea house under the bridge aren't quite as green and pleasant as they used to be. With local fears about global warming and climate change, it's confirmed for us our decision to cycle and not fly back to Australia.
Shortly after the couple left Iran, flash floods swept across the country, killing 120 people. It is this unpredictable nature of our changing climate which has finally brought governments of the world together. Since 1991, the United Nations climate talks have been trying to negotiate agreed targets for the reduction of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Despite thousands of people dying in landslides, floods and heat waves every year, and over 1 million plant and animal species facing extinction, a decade of discussion has produced little in the way of a workable solution. Every climate change conference held in every country has seen public demonstrations urging governments to implement real solutions.
They have to stay here until they can decide something for real and not just blah blah blah.
In London, climate campaigners are now targeting businessmen who they believe have been involved in hindering the climate change agreements.
Hello. I often wondered what would happen if someone did that to you.
What do you think, Mr. Stuart?
Yeah?
What's your reaction?
Oh, well, surprised. People are welcome to express their opinions. I hope they got the right person.
Climate activists have pointed out the former chairman of Shell Oil, claiming his influence is allowing multinational corporations to dodge responsibility for climate change. All across Europe, activists from campaign group Rising Tide have been using videos to encourage community groups, individuals and organisations to take more direct forms of action in tackling climate change.
Every year, thousands of people fly from around the world to go to one of these enormous jamboree climate change talk shops, and then they all fly back. Very, very little is changing. As far as I can see, the main beneficiaries of this international process at the moment are the companies who fly them there.
The financial world's response to the crisis has been to invent a scheme for turning our pollution into profit. Planned to begin in 2005, their carbon trading scheme will allow each country to produce a legal amount of carbon dioxide pollution each year. Go over the limit and heavy fines will be imposed. But any country that does succeed in reducing its emissions can sell its carbon credits to balance the levels of the more polluting nations.
On the face of it, carbon trading seems like quite a good idea. Everybody gets an amount that they're allowed to pollute, and people who manage to reduce below that level get to trade for difference. So you could say, well, it's an incentive for reducing. The problem is that by setting that level, we're setting in concrete the principle that those people are allowed to pollute that in the first place.
Granting industries the right to legally pollute is just one of many concerns about the scheme. Carbon trading may also allow large corporations to take ownership of our atmosphere.
As soon as you start allocating the property rights, you're actually privatising the atmosphere. And really what you're creating is a vast new speculative carbon market. And the ultimate beneficiaries of that are not going to be the climate, they're not going to be the developing countries, they're actually going to be the world financial community.
George and his colleagues in the Rising Tide network have been taking their message directly to the people attempting to profiteer from climate change. Representatives from the United Nations and the government met with the oil companies in a hotel basement to discuss the implementation of carbon trading. Instead, the delegates received a presentation they hadn't planned on.
The big issue that really faces all of you is we hear many times the argument that, well, we have to have this, this is the only way that we can go ahead. The simple fact of the matter is that we believe this is not going to work, and what you're discussing here is simply not going to work. It's a diversionary tactic to draw attention from the real needs, whilst at the same time it isn't going to work. This is a protest. This is a protest because we actually believe that there is a right to express some kind of emotional engagement with this as well, and we also didn't seriously believe that if we did this any other way that you would actually listen to our points as well.
Excuse me, sir, can I stop you there?
We're totally in denial about climate change and about what it means. We've got every scientist is telling us that this is a huge crisis. Every scientific institution is telling us we have to do something about it. And yet nothing changes. It's like people who are suffering from lung cancer and they just keep smoking. We keep doing it.
Thank you. We'll meet again soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry for that. You have our apologies.
In the Netherlands, the largest single producer of carbon dioxide is Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport. When construction was set to begin on its 5th runway, climate activists broke into the airport just before dawn. Concerns about global warming are so strong that previous demonstrations even forced the national airline to ground its aircraft. On this occasion, the Dutch environmentalists blockaded a main runway, forcing the airport to shut down its operation.
Waarschijnlijk binnenkort van de landingsbaan de Zwanenburgbaan van Schiphol wordt afgezeild. We hebben hier bijna 1,5 uur de baan bezet gehouden. Ik hoop dat het weer een stukje duidelijker is geworden wat een waanzin het is om deze luchthaven uit te breiden.
When Manchester Airport planned to put a second runway through this valley, the public launched the largest civil disobedience campaign against aviation ever seen across Britain. People from all over the country came to defend the forests. Anwen Jones even left her job in North Wales to live amongst the trees.
Defnyddio'n nghorff I stopio chainsaws, I stopio'r diggers ac I stopio nhw rhag cael fi mas o'r goeden trwy'n nghyfder.
Mindless vandalism is what's being committed by the people that want to build this runway. What we're doing may be classified by them as criminal damage, but it's morally justified and morally defensible.
Masked men were hired in an attempt to bring a swift end to the demonstrations. However, the protests still continued on for 2 years, costing the airport over £7 million. But did the demonstrations and the destruction of the countryside persuade Manchester Airport to rethink its expansion plans?
I would take issue with the notion that we are destroying the countryside. I mean, clearly Putting a runway down does involve some disruption, but the reason why we have got our planning permission is because the inspector, in concluding his planning report, said the case for the second runway was overwhelming.
The second runway at Manchester was eventually built, but protests against airport expansion have continued elsewhere, such as in Swansea. As construction continues at the airport on the Gower Peninsula, local people are being trained by activists from Manchester to take more radical steps in their protests.
There seems to be no route for us to go through the proper channels. The council's not listening to us. I've written 3 letters to Assembly members with no answer at all. I think it's time to upgrade what we're doing, to take a stronger action.
Excellent, that was good. And one thing you might want to do is what you did then, which is the person with the key then goes off away somewhere. Right. So actually they can't check you for the key, but we can access it if we need to. Everyone knows that it's bad to drive a car, but what people don't realise is that aviation is actually far more polluting. It's the most polluting way to travel. And we're trying to get that message across, as well as directly opposing expansion of Swansea Airport. So I'm here to help train these people, these local people, and show that if everyone does something, we can actually stop it.
Air Wales is closing its operation in Swansea and moving services to Cardiff. The company says not enough people were making the most of the cheap flights from Swansea Airport to places like Amsterdam and Dublin.
In the history of powered flight, we have advanced rapidly from that first 12-second journey in 1903 to the enormous fuel-burning airliners of today. Within that short time, we have produced enough pollution to dangerously alter our fragile atmosphere. If aviation is to continue serving us, the airline industry will have to accept the true cost to our planet and the cost to a generation of people not yet born.